And once I see the live, I'll hit the recording. And we are off to the races. Let's see here. All right. They're actually letting it happen. Amazing. Okay, let me hit the recording. And here we go. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. As you know, we are currently overcoming massive extreme censorship. So if you want to support this show, please share episodes as far and as wide as you can. Leave a review on iTunes. Become a member at mattbelair.com, where you're going to get all the episodes that are backed up there, because they've also deleted Patreon. And you'll also see the YouTube, which is working now, but you'll have them all backed up on Odyssey and Rockfin as well, because who knows how long this will last. But the best thing you can do to support this show is to do 3 kind acts wherever you are in the world today. Today's guest earned a law degree from the University of Connecticut in 2009. After walking away from a career in law, he did a variety of different jobs before pursuing a shamanic path. He did ritual work with spiritual mediums in Zimbabwe and South Africa. In 2018, he left for Africa, where he lived with African Bushmen and learned from renowned healer Kunta Boo. From there, he traveled to India and Nepal in search of a guru and lived with a number of yogis in the mountains. Welcome to the show, Michael Falcone.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the podcast, man. When you first reached out, we had to go back and forth because we're like, wait, man, are you serious? Like, this is some crazy stuff that you're telling me. And, I'm trying to deduce it through the email. And, then you start sending me some pictures, and then you spend some time with some, African Bushmen, which is very fascinating. And I've had a few guests on the show that have done that as well. And they had really amazing stories to tell. Also, going to India and doing these kind of, well, I don't know. I like these guru searches, right? Like, I want to figure if these people are there, like when I went to Nepal, or if Babaji is still here, or Yogananda is still here, or, Jesus Christ is still here. I want to show up and figure out where they are. And if I have to go to, these remote places in the world, I want to show up and do that. And I feel like that's what you've done, and very similar to me. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your background. We'll get into your story and some other stuff, but I'd love for you to share, a little bit about your background and what caused you to do that trip and pursue that journey.
Okay. Well, how far back to start? So I, was supposed to be a lawyer, got my law degree, decided that wasn't for me at all. Luckily at that point I was still pretty young. And then for a long time, I just kind of had dozens and dozens of different jobs. I was a pedicab driver in Denver for a while. I was a gardener, carpenter, general landscape work, package handler, all kinds of stuff. I did the woofing thing. I did a little bit of traveling. And I guess always in, I don't know, call it my heart, my soul, or whatever, there was always something nagging at me. Like being in nature was very important. A very natural life, a spiritual life. Spirituality was always kind of important to me, but I didn't know exactly what that meant. So, and then I had read some books about the Bushmen and stuff, and their way of life had always appealed to me, just in its simplicity. Their spirituality was very simple and just love. The Bushman healers will say that if you're going to be a healer, your heart needs to be open to everyone, not just to a few, so, and that always struck me as pretty great. Like one of the Bushman healers in a book that I had read, was saying that he was able to, forgive and keep love in his heart for a man that stole his wife from him, stuff like that. So the Bushman life was always pretty appealing to me. Maybe Africa in general, although I don't necessarily remember. And then I guess things kind of came, my life got pretty bad in maybe 2015. Was pretty much completely heartbroken, not in a good place, and had an awakening experience where my heart opened um, to a phenomenal degree. And that's when, and I hadn't ever read about Babaji before this. I wasn't so much into yoga, Hinduism. I hadn't read the Bhagavad Gita or any of that. And that's when he came to me in my dreams. And I had a dream with the Lahiri Mahasaya cave that you mentioned while we were talking. I wasn't in the cave, but I was in kind of Babaji's palace, that Lahiri Mahasaya was taken to. I guess, kind of in spirit. So yeah, that's kind of how things started.
So this is so this was kind of like your awakening experience that happened, and you were unfamiliar with them at this point, and then that's what spawned you to go with the African Bushmen and learn about the shamanism and their ways of life and their spirituality, and then you went to India after that, which we'll get into. I'm not.
Yeah. Well, I kind of, I mean, I just covered a span of 10 years and in like a minute. So before that, so like I said, I was pretty heartbroken and depressed, and seeking healing. I started working with a shaman doing ritual work. So I first traveled to Africa in 2016, and I went to Zimbabwe and South Africa, and lived with shamans in both of those countries and did ritual work. Came back, and I still, wasn't really sure where I was going with any of this. I went back to an old job that really wasn't going anywhere.
When you were doing the ritual work, was that the Bushmen, or was that it? Did you go back to
No, no,
that?
no. We're not to the Bushmen yet. That
Okay.
was so Mandaza Kandemwa in Zimbabwe was who I started with. And he's what they call a Mondoro or a Gombwa, which is basically a spirit medium or shaman. And he's a very respected shaman over there. I believe a Gombwa, like certain shamans, as far as the spirit world goes, maybe they can only work with certain types of rituals, whether it's water or fire. But a Gombwa is able to work with all of them, and that's what he is. And the story of how I picked Mandaza to start with is kind of a crazy story. Because I started doing ritual work in this country, in the US, with the shaman I was working with, basically to get over grief, regret, all those sorts of things. And the idea behind the rituals are to call your ancestors into your life, and let them work on you to get rid of these negative things that are holding you back. And for a time, it really worked. I felt great. I felt like my path was kind of unfolding, and things were kind of falling into place. And Mandaza, going to Africa, was kind of a continuation of that. And I thought, I might seek initiation as a shaman with him or with someone else. I kind of decided while I was there, Mandaza wasn't necessarily the teacher. I have a lot of respect for him. But anyway, I came back before I was fully initiated or anything. Came back to an old job, and was, pretty bummed out about that. And that was, no, I think I'm at some point. No, I know what happened after that. After that, So when we're talking about the shamanic path, right, in this country, in Africa, this is pretty common stuff, but here, uh, people don't really know about it. So the shaman I was working with in this country was saying that I needed something in my life that was basically, like credentials, essentially.
Shamanic
Um,
credentials.
well, so
It's
mine,
too bad the law degree didn't work in that scenario.
well,
It's like,
right.
those are hard. Those are hard to come by. That's not an easy one.
Well, so what came up for me? I had this incredible, feeling, a place within myself that I didn't really know existed came up, and so I came up with with an idea to join the military, and I wanted to be believe it or not, a special forces medic. Um, but I didn't get that contract. I ended up with an infantry contract. I didn't mention this in my bio because I didn't even get through basic training. I don't know if you can see my finger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during basic training, I mean, I signed up when I was 35 years old. Um, so at basic training, they sent me home. Um, and like I said, the contract that I wanted to get for the military, I didn't get because of the finger. Um, but anyway, the point of this story is I felt like, okay, if I'm a shaman in the US, who's going to listen to me? And the shaman that I was working with, said, well, if you're a special forces medic, people are really going to listen to what you have to say. So it was kind of a way that I thought I could inspire people, kind of have some of those worldly credentials. Um, but anyway, like I said, that didn't pan out. I didn't get the contract anyway. They sent me home. So I go back to, kind of the same type of work I was doing, and kind of depressed and bummed out again. And that's when I had the awakening experience. And that was May of 2017. And
Right. And
then
so, oh, sorry. Go. So this is when the Babaji dream happens. That was that
May
the
20, May 2017. Yeah.
and so did you have a reference for who that was when you were in there? Like, did you, because you hadn't read the Bhagavad Gita, you didn't read the autobiography of a yogi. So did you like know who they were? How did that work?
Well, so I had a copy of yeah, I had a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi lying around that I hadn't read. I think I had started to read it, many years before, and figured, all right, this is a little above my spiritual pay grade or whatever. Put it down.
I
Uh,
remember reading that with the Bhagavad Gita. I was reading it as like reading one page so slow. I was like, oh my goodness. I was like,
yeah,
okay, good. I can comprehend this. Like it was like I felt like I was being tested. I was like, I am comprehending this, but it's not easy.
yeah. I mean, I've definitely done that a lot. I've, picked up spiritual books in the past and figured, okay, I'm not ready for this, and then just put it down, and picked it up maybe years later when I felt like I could understand it better. So I had Autobiography of a Yogi, and said, okay, I'll pick it up. And, I did a Google search too for, the only name I had was Babaji. So I figure I'm going to come up with, 1,000 different names. But I think his name came up, and then I opened up, Yogananda's book, and there it was. I think when I first saw that in the book, I kind of was like, oh my God, I threw it across the couch or whatever I was sitting on. I was like, that's who it was.
So was there when this happened, like was there like a message in the dream or like, you know, so I'll just kind of explain some things that have happened to me and I've heard other guests say like, when they have the awakening experience, they're put into an expanded state of consciousness that's beyond comprehension or words. It's,
Yeah.
it's, I've equated it to like you take a goldfish and the goldfish becomes conscious and you can speak English to the goldfish and show him all around the earth. And he's only known the water. And it's like, what is going on? And then you bring him back down and then he's goldfish, but now he knows, okay, there's something more going on, like there's more than
Yeah.
just this goldfish life. And so it's hard to explain, but how was that for you? Was it something similar, like a feeling space and they kind of guided you, or what was that like?
Um, so actually, I mean, when he came to me in the dream, he took me to like a spiritual classroom and just talked to me briefly. Didn't say, come look for me or anything. In the first one, actually, in the first dream, he didn't even mention his name. I didn't know who he was. I just trusted him instantly. Just the way that he was, very simple. And jumping ahead quite a bit, I mean, one of the yogis I stayed with met him in India, or he says he did. And that's the main word that he used to describe Babaji was simple. But anyway, around this time, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of that. I didn't necessarily feel like I mentioned I was on another podcast and I talked about this a little, but this awakening experience was nothing like I expected. There weren't like crazy visuals or anything, but I just felt like, I don't know, maybe I was seeing. And I guess the important thing about consciousness, it felt very much heart related, all related to the heart, not anything to do with the mind. It's like I remember sitting outside just in my yard and feeling like every blade of grass, had its own life experience. And if I was sitting in a coffee shop, I just felt and knew that every human being in this world makes this world a richer place. So it was that type of thing, but I was very much still myself, you know. I wasn't like floating away or, different visuals and whatnot. I mean, the main thing that I said on the other podcast was I felt like I could forgive anyone, anything. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was really, like I say, they're like all heart, really. Um, and I mean, I'm sure the heart, has a role to play in generating consciousness too. But that's I guess how I would describe it. Um, just a larger world. Um, yeah, but just from right here. Sorry, I'm probably slouching again, but yeah.
Well, yeah, that's beautiful. It reminds me a little bit of how Eckhart Tolle will talk about his awakening. He was, you know, what did he say? He said he was like at home and he said, I can't live with myself anymore. He was like desperate and was thinking about, I don't know if he was thinking about committing suicide or making it up. He just sounds like he was in a terrible situation. And he said to himself, I can't live with myself anymore. And he's just like thinking, who is myself? How can I can't live with myself? Like, what's going on here? And just popped. And then apparently what he says is that he stayed or was just in pure bliss essentially on a park bench and was essentially homeless for a year and was just happy with everything. And there's this level of peace that comes, right? That's why I think people really gravitate towards things like psychedelics and ayahuasca, because people will talk about those experiences of this oneness where you feel it directly, or meditation as well, and all these other spiritual practices. The challenge is with meditation and spiritual practices, it's a longer process. You don't get that instant
Yeah.
gratification. You know what I mean? It's like we all want to be fit. So do we go to the gym and eat right and do all the right things, or do we go grab the liposuction or the pills off the shelf or whatever the case is, right? We want a little bit of that quick fix. So, with what you experience, it lines up because it's this greater experience, this greater expansion. And it is about feeling and interconnectedness and love and compassion and forgiveness and all the beautiful traits of a human or a man or a woman and a spirit. What our greatest capacity is. And yeah, I think you're talking about at the beginning, like somebody was forgiving someone for, oh yeah, that one of your mentors was talking about, or somebody's wife or something, right? Somebody had a, you
Oh,
forget.
just that's what the Bushman healers say is that if you're going to be a healer, your heart needs to be open to, the whole world, essentially.
Yeah, and
Um,
somebody's wife had.
no, this one healer was saying, this is in a book that I read, that he was able to forgive even the man that stole his wife. He, you know,
Right,
was
right.
able to.
Well, yeah, that story reminded me of this. It's on YouTube still, I think, where this guy, there's this murderer they find, and he kills like I think it kills, and I don't know if he does other horrible things to these women, but I think he killed like 3 or 5 women or something, and they convicted him, and this convict is there and the family's there, and so the family gets an opportunity to say something to this guy, right? And so everybody is basically like burn in hell, die, you know what I mean, all the things that you would feel and think and experience. And the last guy is this old man with a beard, and he sees him and he says, I'm a Christian, and if I'm gonna walk the ways of Jesus and try to embody those teachings, I need to find forgiveness for you. And he goes, so I forgive you. And then the guy starts, the whole time he's been straight faced, right? And then the guy just starts bawling, and I'm just like, that level of forgiveness. And the guy's crying. He's like, obviously heartbroken and crushed. But to even consider that option, to say that, is to me extraordinary. It's extraordinary to be able to do something like that and mean it.
Yeah. Well, do you remember there was a shooting in Amish country? I think like a whole bunch of Amish kids were killed in a school or something. And a lot of the Amish people, stood up and said, we forgive this guy. And I remember seeing a mainstream news story. I don't remember, which, anchor or whatever was talking about it, was like, oh, most of us probably, can't understand this, but, there you have it. The Amish forgive this guy.
That's
You don't remember
amazing.
that story?
It kind of rings a bell, but I'm off the news radar. I don't know if it might have been more prevalent in the United States. Canada, we're our own little hut up here, but yeah, even now
Okay.
with all this stuff going on, the Amish seem to be light years ahead of everyone else. Like we thought they were behind, but now they can have their own food and water. They know what's going on. They're not confused. So maybe they had it right with community. Because if things go south here, I'm not going to know what to do. I can't hunt. I can't take care of myself. Can't grow anything. So they really had it right. Okay, so yeah, so you have this awakening experience, and then what do you decide to do? Is that when you decide to go to Africa?
So like I said, yeah, Babaji, he didn't say come look for me, but I had a dream. Oh, what he actually said, he asked me if I regretted my first trip to Africa, because, I didn't, I wasn't initiated or anything. I spent a lot of money, obviously. But I said no, I didn't regret it. And then he said that I needed to commit, to going there, basically, or just owning who I was, staying here. But then some months later, as I wasn't necessarily making plans to go to Africa or India or anywhere else, then I had a dream from an ancestor that I really trust saying, you have to go to Africa. And so that's when I started saving money and planning to go back to Africa, live with the Bushmen. And then, I'm pretty sure uh, Babaji, among others, realized that from Africa, I would most likely continue on to India, to find him. And as I made this plan, then of course my dreams changed. And, I had dreams about like, okay, you know, I will end up in India searching for him. So, so that's how that progressed from there. I basically spent well, first I broke my leg that same month. And then once that healed, I spent the rest of the year just working 2, 3, 4 jobs, save money to go traveling. So
That's amazing. Well, it reminds me of one of my buddy's stories. I've actually kind of witnessed, or have been like in close proximity to a few people who had an awakening experience. And, one of my buddies just was a good dude. And, regular guy, but very stressed with his job, and, ended up having an awakening experience. And I found about this later. So I was there in Whistler when this happened, and I noticed him. He's like, he ended up quitting his job, and we started to have different conversations, but we weren't close enough to for me to know exactly what happened. But a few years later, I find out that his father had come to him in his dream. His father, who had passed, came to him in a very powerful dream and woke his ass up. Like it was the most. And he's like, I can tell you this dream, for point, is the most vivid thing. He's like, is more, just like some of these experiences, whatever it is, it's more real than this environment. Like these places I've been to is like somehow more real. Like this is the dream and that was real. And so, that was his experience. And then he shifted and ended up doing a big travel as well. So it changed his trajectory. So, a couple notes, like for people who don't know who Babaji is, it's who Yogananda references in the autobiography of a yogi, in that lineage of masters. So there's, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Lahiri Masiai or something. It's a, how do you pronounce that?
I've been saying Lahiri Mahasaya, but
I
I
think
could be
that's
wrong. I
better
could be
than
wrong too.
that's better than mine. But there's these lineage of these yogis, and they have very, very fascinating experiences. So that's one thing I wanted to kind of share for people who might not know who that is. And also for like the quote unquote awakening experience, to me, it's just something that changes the trajectory of your life. It's something big, and sometimes it's gifted to you. Sometimes it's in a dream. Sometimes you could do it in a meditative state. Some people have done it through psychedelics with the right intention, but you really do need the right intention for that to stick, if that's the route you're going to go with it. And, it's something that expands your consciousness and opens your heart, or something changes. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's a life or death experience, and sometimes it's an experience where people are going to die from an injury, like an illness, right? Then they have boom, a wake up, because like, oh my goodness, and something gets expanded in their horizon. But the big thing is, though, that's not that uncommon. These things are common, but what's less common is people to then do the work to begin following this thread where they're being pulled. Right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, now there's this thing. Now I got to go follow that thread. But how the heck am I going to go do that? That's the challenge, right? And that's where, when ayahuasca was, I had done ayahuasca kind of before it went very, very popular. And then I noticed people would go, but nothing would change. And they would have this opportunity, but they weren't ready to commit to changing. And so I was like, then you're kind of dishonoring what you saw there, or what you experienced, or what you went to go do. Because that whole thing is about knowing who you are, right? And following those impulses, and trusting yourself, and also trusting the creator spirit to guide you. So then you need a little bit of that resilience to go, all right, you know what I mean? You're guiding me through this process, like, breaking your leg and then figuring it out, working 4 jobs. And like, I don't know where it's going to lead me, but this is the direction I need to go in. So I'm going to shut up. I just wanted to preface it with that, and love for you to continue your story. But I feel like it's really important to say that, a lot of people have these experiences, but there's a big difference in having it and then having the courage to then follow the impulse, follow that little trail that spirit's leading you on.
Yeah. Well, I can speak to this. Well, first, before I dive into any the out there stuff, uh, I also, so after I first went to Africa, I started having a lot of ancestral dreams, and I also met my father. So, whoops. So my father, he killed himself in 2006. And so then after I started doing all the shamanic work and whatnot, I had a night where he found me, or I found him, we found each other. And he was like in limbo or whatever. And yeah, this was a very real, what do they call it? Not a vivid dream. What's the word?
Lucid.
Lucid. Yeah. Lucid dream, or whatever. And then did rituals to, bring him out of that space to a higher vibration or whatever. So yeah, like this whole path and searching for Babaji was kind of prefaced with a lot of these different types of work, different types of dreams. And I can, give different examples of that too. But so what you're saying about the courage to follow this path, this is kind of like the only real sore spot of this whole thing for me. um, because I mean, I agree. It's a lot. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of like renunciates and renunciation and that type of thing. And that never happened for me. I mean, this happened to me, I think, for a very specific reason. Um, are we ready to go into the out there stuff, or
Sure, yeah, but
you would? Yeah.
at any point you can go into the out there stuff.
Okay. Well, first, I guess maybe I'll preface it with, you've heard of Dharma or the Dharma, right?
Yep.
And so I can explain the Dharma to you I can explain it to anyone very easily, but
Like a
I,
dharma, well, I see dharma as like your life path, or like what your dharma is, like who you're meant to be, or what do you mean by the dharma?
okay.
Is it the
So,
same, or yeah, explain
uh,
it just so I'm on board too.
yeah. Okay. So, I mean, everyone knows the story of Jesus in the wilderness, right? And he's fasting for 40 days. And then he's tempted, the devil or whoever says, I will change these rocks into bread, if you just, I don't know, give up on God or whatever, right? And Jesus says, no, I'm not going to renounce anything, and so that's what the Dharma is. Like, you've probably heard other people talk about yogic rules, like no drinking, no touching women. You've heard of these things, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you have the Dharma inside, right, the desire for, Yogananda says the mystic divides the world into two types of people: those who are seeking God and those who are not. And so if you have the Dharma inside, you're able to keep God first. you know um None of those rules apply. You can have a drink, you can hug a woman, do whatever, as long as, I believe Osho says a lot of this too in his earlier works. um and so in the case of Jesus in the wilderness, it's to have that kind of internal direction, that, death first, kind of, if the devil comes and offers you this, to renounce God or like sell your soul or whatever the case may be, you say, no, I'll starve to death. And like I said, I think that's easy enough to explain using the Jesus in the wilderness story, but you can't really be given it. I can't give it to anybody. There really needs to be a catalyst. And so what happened to me, and I think why Babaji chose me, is because have you seen the movie The Adjustment Bureau?
No, maybe.
Uh,
What's I don't
uh,
know.
just so I had met basically a soulmate, um, and that didn't work out. But this is skipping ahead, way to the end of the story, kind of, even though it's at the beginning. But I believe this was their work, and they've, Babaji and my other dreams have kind of said as much, that in order to kind of like give me this dharma, this drive, this inner direction, um, this relationship was, kind of squashed. Um, and But yeah, I mean, the points you make, they're very real, right? I mean, we have family, friends, relationships. And so while what I'm saying is really out there, and like I said, it's kind of the only sore spot for me, it's also kind of important because um, all of these things are the things that keep people from walking, this spiritual path, but they're very real. I wouldn't downplay them. I had a boss that told me once that relationships are the most important thing you'll do with your life. Um, and so this gets into some of what I was going to talk about, because while I don't expect maybe some people to believe everything I'm saying today on this show, I have come across a lot of people that have completely uprooted their lives. Maybe not necessarily to go seek Babaji, but they felt called by God to start a church, in a different state, or to do this, that, or the other thing. And in some cases, I've read about people, their family life is disrupted. Osho talked about this too. Anytime, say you're in a relationship and one person has an awakening experience and the other one doesn't, it's going to change things. It's going to make things hard.
Yeah, you're seeing that right now with relationships and, with the whole scenario, what's going on in the world. It's a pretty divisive thing, depending on which side you're on. It's not like it's almost to the point where if you're on opposite sides now in a relationship, there's a time, there's a time delay on that because you can't divide this. It's just you're on one side or you're on the other, and that's just the way it is at this point. Maybe a few will come over with a little bit of help or an awakening experience, but it's feel like people have made up their mind. And when you're talking about people traveling to start a church, when I was in Nelson, British Columbia, there was a tea shop there with this couple from Taiwan, and they got a message. However, they received their messages and flew to Nelson, British Columbia, where they didn't know anything about Canada. They didn't know anything about anything, and they just thought they were supposed to go there. They start a tea shop, and they serve tea, and they do weekly teachings on the Tao Te Ching. And if you think you know that book, you do not. They were breaking down the words, each word. It was like they would take one verse and we'd be there for 2 hours and be breaking down one verse from that book. I was like, oh my goodness. And like the one word, and like it was just nuts. It was like these people were masters. And I really tried to have them film it and record it, but they're like, I don't know. They're like, no, we can't put this online and we're not the master teachers and this and that. I was like, holy, like this is amazing stuff. So I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, the people that does happen. So yeah,
Yeah.
please continue.
Yeah. So I guess, well, I guess part of the cautionary tale, right, is so the other thing, along with people that, say become a missionary or start a church or whatever the case may be, the things that I'm talking about, at first I thought, okay, it sounds crazy. No one's going to believe it. But many people are, try and call this stuff into their lives, right? I mean, either through prayer, chanting, whatever the case may be. And, it has potential to be very disruptive in your life. Once again, skipping ahead to the cautionary portion of the tale, but yeah, and once I got back home to the US, I started, I was on a forum, for example, and I came across a guy that said, I've been in contact with a demonic being and he's, offering me this and that. And he proves himself by saying like, this will happen. And then this thing happens. But then if you read a little bit down the thread, you find out like, oh, maybe his wife is buying into this stuff that this being is whatever he's selling, and kind of moving in a different direction, so very disruptive, to relationships and family life. And and the other thing is, of course, yeah, well, I think people that watch this podcast in particular might believe me. Most of the people in my life, I've told my story to a couple of them, or many of them at this point, and none of them believe it. So that alone is also kind of divisive. The experience that I've had, I'm kind of an alien in my own country, now that I'm actually back and everything. But so yeah, I mean, I guess as far as finding the courage to be on the path, I guess one thing I guess I would say, we had chatted a little bit before about answers I wish I'd given on the other podcast, um, about just when I wasn't unwell and doing my yoga or meditation practice and really wasn't getting anywhere. Um, I think we have to have a lot of courage outside of our spiritual practice into living daily practice. So in other words, I hear a lot of times, meditation is hard for people because they have these nagging thoughts in their mind. They have maybe dark thoughts or whatever. But an example for what I'm going to say now is, like, let's say you say something to someone that you shouldn't have said and it hurts their feelings. Um, well, the answer might not be being on your yoga mat or in meditation. The answer might be picking up the phone and making an apology, or an in-person apology. Or if you're sitting down in meditation and you have a nagging thought that I really want to do this with my life or try this in my life, well, maybe the answer is to uh, you know stop meditating and go do it and kind of take care of it. And I mean, part of what I think being resilient and being flexible is also very important. Um, so in other words, like, let's say, when I was going to yoga class at times in Denver, you'd have 30-day yoga challenges and this and that, or I feel like I'm not going to be healthy if I'm not in there. But being in the yoga classroom or in meditation is not always going to be the answer. And I think being in tune with yourself, knowing what you need at any given time, like maybe the answer one day is you mess up the 30-day yoga challenge and you go for a hike because you need a hike, and you need to be, and I talked about this, a little bit in the other podcast. I had mentioned that there's so many, like you brought up the Tao Te Ching, and we talked a little bit, maybe before, I don't know if we were recording yet, but about putting down books that we weren't ready for. And I think in the modern day, we have so much, um, the internet is at our fingertips. Any spiritual text from the last couple thousand years, we could probably find a copy of online and maybe read them, but not really understand them. And like I think I said before, my awakening experience was nothing like I expected. And so I think, getting onto the path or having the courage to follow it is to, first of all, not necessarily have expectations about what it's going to be. There are many different ways to follow um, your own path. And an example of that is, I have a friend that's a pretty normal guy, doesn't believe a word I think I've told him. He's a carpenter, um, but he's told me at different points that I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do with my life, and he's doing it. So in a way, he's walking his own path. And as I thought I was walking, my destiny path, um, I felt very privileged and often thought, like, everyone can't do this at once. Yeah, not everyone can just walk away. Um, and the way that I felt about that was, everyone in the world serves me. The farmers growing the food are serving me, and I serve them by walking my destiny path. That's the most I can do. So it's, I think most people probably will not up and renounce the world and walk into the Himalayas like I did, but that's okay.
Well, I definitely agree that we have our own path to walk, and I think it's really important for us to understand what that is. I don't think that we're supposed to mimic anyone else. I think we're supposed to listen to ourselves and our connection with, our inner voice or spirit or God, the Creator. Ask for guidance and follow those impulses to be who we truly are. That's going to be the best thing for the environment, and it's also going to be the best thing for us to fill our destiny so that we can be of service to other people, right? If your friend is a master carpenter and I need some help, right? That's the guy I get. If you get the people who love what they do because they're masters of their craft and they support their community through whatever that is. So, with that being said, when you went to the Himalayas or you went to Africa, like what were your biggest takeaways, or what's the important part of those stories? I know you trained with various people. So is there a particular story or set of lessons that you feel are most important from those experiences?
Um, well, yeah, I mean, I have the very, the big one, the biggest, which, sorry, little, so I did see a couple of your podcasts, and you had, a guy on here that was talking about Babaji. And I believe you asked a question, and this might have been years ago. So I don't know if you remember, but you were asking about, if the false light, when you die thing is real type, do you remember that?
Oh
Talking about
yeah,
that?
it's talks about the soul reincarnation, and just I don't know, with your mic, it's now shuffling now, and I think that's better because they're starting to get a little bit of a rumble. So I think you're good now.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's all right. Yeah, so there's this theory out there that what's happened is the moon has been taken here, right? And there's this false light so that when you die, you think you're going home, but you get sucked into the false light of the moon and your soul gets reincarnated here on Earth. And I thought, my goodness, that is a terrifying it's a terrifying theory. And I remember in the autobiography of a yogi, Yogananda's master dies. I think it's Lahiri Master.
Sri
Oh, Sri
Yukteswar.
Yukteswar. Yeah, yeah. So then he comes back on as like a star and then animates. He's like, "Oh my goodness!" And he talks to him. He's like, "Well, what's going on over there?" This is a terrible paraphrase. Terrible paraphrase for what the book says. What's going on over the other side, man? It's just how I would do it. And so he says to him, I do the same thing over there. I help souls get to that next level, right? Like I'm a guide on in the next level of spiritual evolution, essentially. So I thought that was just a very fascinating insight. Then he also has a great passage. This is a side note, but he is watching clips in World War II, and he's sitting in the theater and he's crying because all these people are dying. And then one of his masters kind of shows up. I think it's one of those metaphysical experiences. Shows up and he's like, "Why are you crying?" He's like, "Well, look at all these people dying." And then he basically says it's like this realm is a hologram or illusion, just like that screen that you're watching. And Yogananda wasn't buying it, or he couldn't accept it where it could relieve his grief, right? He's like, "Yes, I hear you and I believe you, but I'm still grieving because it's real to me. I'm in that reality. I'm in that hologram." And so whoever it was, I think it was maybe one of the Babaji meetings, and he goes boink, and he gives him a multi-dimensional experience to kind of show him the perspective and give him a little piece as he was watching that. If people haven't read that book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, it's a very, very interesting book. Um, it's like regular stuff, like a regular person's life journey. And then all of a sudden, something nuts, a regular life journey, and then something totally nuts. And, for my life, it's been that same thing. Regular stuff going around kind of like an ape from, trying to search things out and, evolve and learn things. And all of a sudden, I experience something that is not regular reality. Regular reality shatters. Something's happened. It's not supposed to happen, and it does. And so that's where when people will share these stories, I've had enough to be like, okay, like, I want to hear yours. And the podcast people have also shared some pretty wild things. So anyway, we'll go back. Yeah, so we were talking about the false light of the moon. So I'd love for you to, if you have an insight on that, talk about that, because I hate that theory. It's like the worst one ever.
Well, so I think I mentioned this. This wasn't it doesn't have a happy ending. Um, 'Cause I mean, basically what I learned, Babaji is, he's not who he says he is, to be, I mean, an understatement, you know, to be sure. A huge understatement. Um, uh, yeah. So all of a sudden I feel very hesitant, but to say exactly what happened to me, which is why, part of the cautionary tales and stuff, of what you call into your life externally. Um, uh, yeah, because this is basically, as far as what I've learned and what got me clear of everything that was happening to me, was basically declaring my sovereignty and free will as a human being, um, which is why I brought up the law. You had that common law guy. So this kind of goes to the karmic and cosmic law side of things. But basically what happened to me, I think there is a pretty big precedent for it, actually. Have you heard of J. Krishnamurti?
Yep.
Okay. And are you familiar with his dissolution speech? And he was like the head of the Order of the Eastern Star or something like that.
I've heard about the Eastern Star, but I don't know about his disillusionment speech. But with you're talking about the cautionary tale, I've heard a few of those. So I'm curious, and I feel like the real um, story is important, because
Okay. All right. I could,
I've heard some pretty messed up stuff, and I think that's why when people talk about psychedelics, or people say, well, if you're doing this, you're calling in demons and things like that. Well, I've heard enough cautionary things where I feel like this shamanic realm and the spiritual realm is something not to be messed with, and there needs to be like a pure vibration of truth, and like, yeah, like you said, what you let in. So now I'm curious to see to
well,
see which way this goes, because
so
yeah, go ahead.
so Babaji, um, it's mentioned that he is Shiva on Wikipedia by, I think, Swami or Sri M or something. And he was hinting that that's the case. But at any rate, any of that doesn't matter. The fact is, he is basically false light. Um, Demonic would be a good, for lack of a better word, because I realize now that I'm back, when I say demonic, you know, I know what a dog is, I know what a cat is, I know what a chair is. I don't actually know what a demon is, but like I say, for lack of a better word, that's that's what he is.
No, what happened for you to think that? And I it's interesting because, like, you know, in this whole realm, I like to hear people's stories, because also feel like in this spiritual realm, any person can become anything. You know what I mean? So not to say that he is or he isn't, because I would like to take it with a grain of salt and know. But I've heard like people say, "Well, don't do yoga because they're demonic poses." So I kind of looked into that and I was like, "Oh crap! Like, are they?" And I'm like, at the end of the day, I don't know. I don't think so. And I also like stretching, but I sure hope not. I'm not doing something that's like, and that's the whole thing with this spiritual realm and what's going on here. We don't know. And I did a great podcast yesterday with Dame Rich. And one of the things he said, and he put it in a simple way, and one of my Native American elders told me this as well, because I was telling him about one of the people that I was learning from, and I spent a lot of time learning from them. And I was like, I don't know anymore. Like, I think that maybe that person might not be who they said they are, and they might be misleading people. You know what I mean? And I was like, I spent a lot of time learning. And so I was talking to one of my my other native teachers. He says the creator knows your intent, right? It knows who you're it knows what you're trying to do. It knows you're intending to do good. Like you said, it knows if you're seeking God. And in seeking God and seeking the true creator and life and spirituality, you might make a mistake, because you don't know. And it's just like, well, and even with words, and you go into law and different stuff, and you think that you're saying one thing, you're saying another. And so I feel like the intent is very important. And if you do get off track, the creator will pull you on track. So I want to preface it a little bit for you to soften the blow, if that helps.
Yeah, no, yeah, so all right, so I can backtrack and talk about basically everything I was doing in India. And it's so if you read some of the other ascended master stuff, specifically ones that are kind of related to the Krishnamurti story, they talk about if you're a candidate to be a disciple of one of these ascended masters, right? Like everything is, first of all, there's hierarchy, and everything is a test. You're tested in different ways, to test that devotion to God and your willingness to surrender completely and all that kind of thing. So when I told that Jesus fasting in the wilderness story, I mean, that was one of the tests for me. um, I was in the mountains near Badrinath, not right there, but near there. And I was out there for 34 days. I had food for the first 7 days. So I was fasting for maybe, 25 days or whatever, um, and failed the test. Um, because on June 6th, which I thought that day, okay, it's June 6th, the day of the beast or whatever, or day of man. And a group of government funded geologists came over the ridge, and they had a ton of food with them. They offered me food. I'm starving, and I ate a ton, and failed. uh Simple as that. I went on a pilgrimage for 3 months through the mountains from Ladakh, from a monastery in Lamayuru, Ladakh, to Kedarnath, which is one of the other four Shankacharya temples in Uttarakhand. That took me 3 months. Um, and then it's like, okay, well, I got to Kedarnath. I obviously can't meet him there. I'm supposed to meet him at this lake that's associated with Vishnu, which is above Kedarnath. And so I snuck out of my guest house and I went up there, found the trail early in the morning. And I was supposed to wait, and be patient. I didn't have much food again, but my visa was expiring. A snowstorm came in. I left. Yeah. I failed. And there's all sorts of things like that. Um, in retrospect, I mean, I failed so many of these tests. It's kind of remarkable, actually. And then when I finally got to Rishikesh just before the pandemic started, and I guess that must have been 2019, that's when the high weirdness started. When okay, I've gone on pilgrimage for 3 months. I've done the fasting thing. I've been, even though I failed all these times, all these different tests, I've been earnestly searching. I've been disciplined. I've been meditating. I haven't been doing like touristy things. I've been seeking Babaji for them. That's it. And so the word comes that he's accepted you, and now it's a game between him and the master of darkness, right? And I have to figure out which is light and which is dark, and kind of do the right things, stay disciplined, and then I would meet him in person. And that
How did you get this message? Was this like in a dream message or a telegram or what?
all right, so this is, I mean, like I said, this is the weird. If you read Kut Humi and some of these other ascended masters, they say if you're a candidate for this, to be a disciple of whoever, they will put electrodes, I don't know what that means, like in your auric field or your energy field or something. And it's definitely true. I felt good energy, during this time and stuff.
Sounds like the Matrix when they're popping you out and putting that signal and they give them the pellet so they can find them.
Yeah. And what I said on the other podcast, the Hindus say, it's kind of like we have the image, right, of the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. You've seen that in cartoons and stuff.
Yep.
And this is at least part of what it's like. It's like having people talking over my shoulder, dreams, daytime dreams, visions, not necessarily visions because they're all internal. It's not like I'm necessarily seeing things outside of myself or hallucinating. But a lot of dreams, a lot of energy being sent to me. And during this time, yeah, the things that were happening to me, I guess I believe them. I really don't think about them anymore. And at this point, I was still kind of like, okay, this is a game between the light and the dark. So nothing's wrong. I'm just not getting it right. Yeah, they, were capable of putting Inception, basically. I'm sure if you've seen Inception, energy, even physical manipulation to some degree, but all remotely. And whatever remotely means, I honestly don't know. If it's the electrodes, even that doesn't really help because I don't know if that's technological or what that would be. But then the problems only started.
So this is at the point where you get the message to your next test is to see if it's between light and dark.
It's a game
Okay,
between light and dark.
got
So
it.
every night, I'd go to bed, and this is the most basic explanation. It was much crazier than anything I could describe. But I would have a dream, and like there would be a time and a place that I was supposed to be at, right? And maybe before I was there, maybe I wasn't supposed to eat, or maybe I needed to, bathe, or whatever the case may be. And then I'd also have dreams that were kind of misleading me, right? Or being the dark side, telling me, okay, actually, you need to go here and meet him here. And I never got it right. And I always knew how I got it wrong, actually, and like in retrospect. So kind of weird. It's almost as if something were. Like I said, to fail as many times as I did is pretty remarkable. But uh, so, and the reason things went wrong is so he involved someone else in this whole thing. And someone else that ended up, kind of leaving and going somewhere else. And I said, okay, well, you know what, I'm not going on without this person. And so I failed enough times. I'm done. I'm going home. And at that point, yeah, things were pretty horrible to say the least. Have you seen X-Men Apocalypse by any chance?
I have, but I can't remember the entire story.
Well, so this is what I told a friend. If you want to visualize, right? So Apocalypse is a blue being that calls himself Elohim. It's from the Bible. You're familiar with Elohim. And he's trying to take over Charles Xavier's mind and body, right? If you remember that at all.
Yeah.
He's kind of having this mental battle. And the other way that I've described it is as if you were operating a computer that was infected with a terrible virus, and you just had pop-ups coming up in your mind 24/7, dreaming when you're asleep, and even when you're awake, just your operating system is just a rotating basket of images of, he wants me to do this or that, or he's angry, basically having an angry demon walking around in my mind.
Damn.
And it would stop for maybe half an hour at a time, and I would be like completely relaxed, but not know what to do with myself because like I got my mind back. And so one of my friends suggested maybe the movie that's the real correct visual representation is Fight Club. Like there's just two sides of yourself. But I was never gone. Like I was always there. I was actually able to interact with people to some degree, but but I was starving. I wasn't really able to eat. If I tried to eat, things got really bad. So yeah, and finally I was so scared. And even throughout this, you remember, this is why the whole little thing on the dharma was important. Um, because I felt like this was my destiny to such an extent that, like, I wasn't fleeing the country right away, you know. I got help from my shaman friend. I got a reading from him, and he was a little bit annoyed. He was like, "Just leave. I don't need to do a reading for you." And he did a reading, and he said, "Okay, there's a demon standing right next to you. You're in full flight or fight mode. You know, you need to get home. You need to leave right now." Um, I eventually got out of there. Um, it was actually way worse when I got back here for a while. Way worse. Um, and I mean, on the positive side, and this is why I guess I asked you about the false light as a preface to this, is the way that, so I have pretty powerful spirit medicine that I use for rituals and stuff. And I did rituals to reclaim my sovereignty, my free will, um, void any contracts that might have been in place that allowed this to happen to me. And that's really what got me clear. It's kind of, like I say, voiding uh, any contracts that may have existed before I was ever born here. Um, and I brought up J. Krishnamurti um, because Krishnamurti was supposed to bring Maitreya into the world. And Krishnamurti was originally, I can't remember if it was Alice Bailey or Annie Besant. I probably not pronouncing that name right. But and those two women were associated with the Theosophist movement. And I only read the stuff, once I finally got back and everything. Anyway, when I was in India, I picked up a book called The Voice of Babaji, and one of the authors, it turns out, I found this out when I got home, was also a student of one of these big time Theosophist ladies. So there's the definite connection. And Babaji is of course associated with the other ascended masters in this hierarchy. And then if you read about the Krishnamurti story, it's basically mine. Maybe, I mean, we can't ask Krishnamurti exactly what happened, but and I believe I read something by Kuthumi, one of these ascended masters, that say, he's been thoroughly denounced by the Great White Brotherhood, as they call themselves, I guess. And they say, as if you retract your free will, our flow of energy will stop. This will all stop. And it sounds like what happened to him is basically what happened to me. And then, of course, in I think 1929, although I could be wrong, he gave his dissolution speech where he says the world needs to be free of religion, mankind needs to be free. And I mean, I'm only speculating, but I'm, can only imagine maybe he found out whoever his guru was, or Maitreya, was a being that he didn't want in his life anymore. So yeah, I mean, that's the grand takeaway. I mean, there's probably other smaller ones that I skipped right over, but and I mean, there are lots of positive takeaways that I think come from this. And I could speculate why. I think, I mean, I'm not one to speculate, but a friend asked me, like, why you? Why couldn't he just let you go home? Why did this need to be the case? And the answer for me that I've kind of come up with is that this entity that calls himself Babaji or Shiva needed a body to attach to be able to experience the full range of human emotion, and just the full range of experience that we're able to in this three-dimensional body. And yeah, and kind of learn from us. My friend quoted something that the Quakers say, and I think it's a quote from Rilke, which is, inside of human beings is where God learns. So God, if God's going to learn, needs human beings. And so yeah, I mean, I guess I mean, my positive takeaway is just how important our humanity is, and how unique we are, and how much we're capable of. And I guess, oh man, sorry, my computer's, I'm going to need to plug in my computer at some point. Mm, but yeah, and then I guess, so the meditation was good while I was over there. It was very different from most forms of meditation that I've heard about. And this kind of goes along with the, the fullness of humanity, or capability. And oh, by the way, I should, like, they kind of confirm these things, once I'm kind of clear of, like, being attacked, having demons attached to me and all that kind of crap. I have a dream where I'm in the adjustment bureau asking, okay, like, why was this done to me? And the answer that I was given, which is not really an answer, after all is said and done, really, in comparison to any normal human being, like, these beings don't seem very bright. But the answer was that we are unique. And, of course, I think to most humans, that's not really an answer. If we're unique, why not let us thrive and be unique rather than manipulating us? But yeah, and that's, I think, what gave me a lot of that perspective, as, how important we are. And I say that because I've heard a lot of people, meditators, yoga practitioners, whatever, struggle with, like, am I trying to disappear in meditation? What am I doing with my thoughts? And so, just to share, like, what my meditation was like as I was still in India was one of fullness. I didn't think of trying to make myself disappear, but making my real self appear, and fully, stepping into my humanity, not necessarily becoming a witness, because I'm already a witness. I'm already kind of the living embodiment of, spirituality, and all the terms that we talked about, all our capabilities for forgiveness and love, they're here, they're with us. And it's really a case of embodying them and living them, living those truths. Oh boy, my battery's running low.
Well,
I might.
if you've got a charger, feel free to go ahead and grab it. I'll just pause.
Okay, yeah, maybe just pause a second. Thanks.
All
Sorry.
right. Yeah, all good. I think we're still live on YouTube, so if you're out there, just give us a moment. When he comes back, I'll start the recording again. It's a freaking, it's a wild story. And as I've traveled the world, I have heard countless stories like this. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative. And for me, what really comes up is like, there's something. This is not just a physical realm. There's a spiritual realm to this. So, all right, I'm gonna put the recording on again, and then I'll kind of say the thing. I'll say it again.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. What I was saying is, I've done a lot of traveling, and I did the same thing. I was a seeker. I went to Nepal because I wanted to, reach enlightenment and search people like Babaji or Jesus or whoever, are these spiritual masters, and learn from them and understand these things. And as I've traveled, I've heard countless stories similar to this. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative. And what it confirms for me is this is a metaphysical realm. There is a spiritual realm here. There are other things going on. And so we need to be careful about what we open ourselves up to, and be
Yeah.
mindful of those things, and but understand there's something greater here. But one of the things that I like, and when you talked about, yeah, being unique, I've heard these different concepts in different ways, like whether they're entities, right? They're not physical, so they want the fullness of a physical human experience, right? And part of how, I guess, in the Bible, it talks about how Lucifer is the prince of this kingdom and can deceive and do all these different things. And he does that so we can kind of give our free will away and consent to kind of be hijacked, right, through fear and through giving up our free will to let something else come in, because we don't feel good enough as we are. We're not special as we are. It's like, and that's where I really think I really love what you just said, is stepping into your fullness in your meditation, sitting there and, who am I really? What are the limits of my potential? How full can I be in this human experience? And I feel like that's a really powerful thing to say, and a really powerful thing to consider, because with all the practices that I've done in travels, it's like, well, one day I hear that it's, a spiritual practice connecting you to God. And then the next day it's like a demonic practice. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I was like, oh my goodness. But I feel like that intent is so important, in that protection and that um, accountability, for yourself and your own spiritual growth. You know what I mean? And so with your experience, you're seeking Babaji, you go there, then all of a sudden it gets real funky, and like to the point that like reality shaking, you realize you're in a bit of a dangerous spot, and you're like, well, I've made a mistake, this isn't something that I want to
Yeah.
do, right? And so it still seems like you had your free will intact. What's your view now on this world and what we can take for those who are seeking God? And so if people are thinking, okay, I'm going to seek God, but all of a sudden I don't want to get hijacked by a demon, and like, should I be afraid of demons? People will be thinking stuff like that. So after doing this, like, are you more firm that there is a creator and this is a spiritual realm? And how do we, engage with the spirits that have our best interests in mind, if we want to engage with them at all?
Right. So I think step one um, is to first get your stuff clear. And I should put out there that I might be able to help with this. As I said, I have medicine that I use to help get me clear. But the first thing is you definitely want to trust the source. So you want, if there are any agreements that allow you to be manipulated, your energy stolen, for you to be lied to, deceived, you want to make sure to take those away. Because I know you've had people on your show that have talked with some pretty funky beings or out there beings or whatnot. And yeah, we want to make sure that we trust the source. We're not legally allowed to be deceived, hijacked, any of that. And really, so once I got home and I was like, what in the hell just happened? Like, who, all right, who is he really? Like, what's going on? And I came across a website. Oh, I'm shuffling the mic. Sorry.
Yeah, it's only when it goes lower at the bottom, I think it's like, I can hear ruffles.
Oh,
It's
okay.
it's
Sorry. I think
mute.
I
Yeah,
think I am moving it. Sorry. I'm
yeah.
not.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think we have humans in general, I think are pretty trusting in general. I think it's very easy to believe a being like this that comes into our lives. They really, I realize they really have to come to us as false light. If a being came to you and said, if you don't do this, I'm going to murder your family, that's not hard to spot. Right. it's not very subtle. So to any seeker that is trying to connect with whatever being, whether they be an ascended master, the Hindu gods, whatever, um, first, make sure that where things are coming from are internal, are really you. Get yourself clear for first before ever trying to connect with anything like that, any being. If there are beings out there that are worth connecting with, there might be. I just don't know about them. Because I mean, my world's been pretty much turned upside down. My ancestors, my ancestors are worth connecting with. I thought were with me, and at this point, I'm not sure. One thing I'm not clear of that I should mention is my dreams are still nothing but annoying. Occasionally not prophetic, but accurate, I guess you would say, which at this point is, just annoying. Because on the shamanic path, taking a step or two back, as part of the training, like if I had a dream, for example, for someone else, it's on me to deliver that message. And I can give you a pretty amazing example if you'd like.
Sure.
So while I was in India, I'm in the mountains at like 10,000 feet, living in one of the spots where I'm supposed to go in and look for Babaji. And I had a dream that a friend of mine that I haven't spoken with in like 7 years was breaking into a house in the eastern United States, and he was living in the western United States. And I was left holding the keys to his life. I was like, all right, well, I don't, this guy may have done a shady thing or two in the past, but I don't think he's going to break into anyone's house. And it was a real pain in the ass for me to get him this message. I had to find an internet connection and a phone and to be able to communicate with him. And he said, oh, well, next week I'm going back east. And he had apparently had a very acrimonious breakup with a fiance or wife. I can't remember which, but in the house that they were living in, which belonged to her, he was thinking about breaking in and stealing back some of the stuff that she still had in there of his. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, I think that's the message, don't do that. And the only way to confirm that this is true is to, have him on, join in on the show right now. But I guess where I'm going with that is like, if I had a message that I was supposed to deliver, something I was supposed to do, I have to put myself out there and deliver it, So as crazy as all this sounds, I mean, I guess, that's why I'm on the show, is, delivering that message. And I think that's not, whether you believe me or not, I mean, I think it just makes good sense to, and Babaji is kind of, as far as trustworthiness goes, he's held up here, right? He's in Autobiography of a Yogi, and, the self-realization fellowship is still very big. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's the message is make sure you trust the source, make sure you are clear karmically, contract wise, and be in control, really, step fully into your own life and be the, kind of the master of it. And to be honest, I mean, if anyone's looking for other advice, I would demystify it before it becomes mystical. as I said before, like if you're sitting in meditation and you have this nagging thought that you really want to say be a rock climber. My shamanic friend always said that spiritual practice could be anything. It doesn't have to be an Eastern style meditation. I believe you're a martial artist. It could be martial arts, could be spiritual practice for a lot of people. So it's definitely not one size fits all. And it could be multiple things. Like I was saying before about being resilient and flexible. Um, if what you need from one day to the next is a hike in the woods versus meditation, then go for a hike in the woods. And but definitely learn to be discerning about what's truly coming from you, versus any kind of external pressure. And I guess one other out there thing that I guess I should mention about Babaji is, however this is done, I mean, I know a lot of thoughts were kind of projected into me through feelings, really. Kind of the inception idea of the strongest thoughts are associated with emotion or feeling or whatever. And I only figured out once I got home that was being done to me. But now, I mean, I guess the good news is I know the difference. And the other thing is, I guess, not to downplay your ego and discriminating mind. Like through all of this, I was always here able to kind of look at and judge what was going on to me, you know? So, and I think in a lot of spiritual practice, the ego and discriminating mind is like, oh, you got to, just lose that. But, it can be helpful too.
Wow, man. Well, that is that is a really wild story. But I love what you said again, where you said be the master of your own life. And doing the law summit, they also would also talk about just saying knowing who you are. And this talks about this in the Bible and other books, because I'm big on the Bible right now, because it's one of the books I avoided, maybe because I grew up a Christian. So I was like, oh no, but now I've really been getting into that. And I've heard even recently, like I've heard things about the Council of Nicaea, and I've also, but recently someone saying the whole thing is nonsense. I'm like, oh my goodness, like I don't know, like I can't confirm or deny it, but I can confirm that this is a spiritual realm, and certain things feel good, and certain things feel off. But knowing myself, like you said, is like, is that voice coming from within you? Like when I was in Nepal and almost died, it was my voice outside of me. So like you said, it's like someone behind you, but it was me. And it was like, I like, what the hell? It was my inner dialogue was now over here saying it at me like a separate friggin' entity. And so that was trippy. And
Yeah.
so I was like saying, okay, Matt, you can go to sleep. And I was like, whoa, okay, well, if I go to sleep, I'm toast. Like that was my option to exit the planet if I wanted to, and chose to stay. But I feel like our intention is paramount, knowing who we are. And like you were just saying there, some of my Native American teachers, they said you don't need to meditate. Other ones would say, spirituality is like taking action. And so, like you said, like whether it's rock climbing, something that holds you focused, something that you enjoy, what your passions are. And this is why I'm so adamant about teaching people how to connect to their life purpose and who they are, and how to understand themselves and follow their intuition and have that courage, because you're leading your life. And even if you make a mistake, you're going to learn from it, but you're going to be able to deduce as you take that wrong step if it's a wrong step, right? Because you're going to be guided by spirit. And once it gets really uncomfortable, in that inner world, like something is off, right? And then you step back on track, and you're using your intuition, and you're getting feedback from what you receive in your environment. So it is a bit of a cautionary tale, but I like how the whole process from you seeking God and all that, it's brought you back to yourself. You know what I mean? And that's what I've said too with my trips to Nepal and Thailand and Cambodia and South America and all these different places, seeking these spiritual masters. I say, you don't need to do that. Just know who you are. go for the things that you enjoy, be the person that you want to be, and create a relationship with the creator in your own way. Like in the Jesus in the Essene says there's 4 ways to know God, 3 or 4. Let me see if I was saying get it right. One of them is studying spiritual texts. One of them is meditation or introspection. One of them is a guide or a teacher. That's legit. Obviously not in this case. and 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 one of them is nature, just going out into nature. And I had a buddy of mine who was like, you wouldn't even call him spiritual in any way, just was like very crass and would make these jokes and things. And we hadn't seen each other for a few years. And I come back and like of anybody would be the last person I think I'm going to have a spiritual conversation with after I traveled, did all these things. It was this person. And I was like, yo, man, how do you know all this stuff? Because he was saying all kinds of true spiritual things, and I was like, how do you know this? And why are you talking about this stuff? And he goes, bro, all I do is I snowmobile every day and I go out in the mountains. And he did hundreds of days a year. He would go out in the mountains and he would snowmobile and he would be with nature. And this brought him understanding. So my whole spiel is just to go back to that last thing you said, is be the master of your own life. The spiritual realm was almost like unknowable. I don't think it's necessary for us to really mess with it. If you do feel drawn to that kind of work, just be mindful of it, but you better know yourself. Just like if you want to play with martial arts, you can do it, but if you go in the ring with me, you better know what the hell you're doing. I'm going to kick your ass. But I'm also aware if I go into a UFC fight, I'm going to get my ass kicked. So there's levels in understanding where you are and what you can handle and what you can't handle. Same with surfing, same with extreme sports, same with any kind of risk that you're taking in your life. The more you know who you are, the more you're going to be able to expand in a way that's safe, right? And you don't get the feedback from the universe like you go too big too soon, you end up getting hurt. So that's my spiel. Do you want to add on to that, and also just letting the people know where, if they want to kind of send you an email or stay in touch, where they should go?
Okay. Well, yeah. So if anyone I wants the kind of help that I'm talking about, it's just my well, you can put my email just in the intro, right? If they want it.
Yep.
Yeah, you can just email me. You can put my email out there. That's fine.
Okay.
And I was just going to add one thing that was really helpful, and one thing that I kind of tried to embody while I was over there the whole time, which is to have a complete experience with everyone I crossed paths with. And no matter how small. So, I didn't want to live with any regret. I think this is a big thing and goes to kind of the living with courage type of thing, but helps you discover who you are. But like, let's say you want to talk with someone, whether it's a man or woman, or, there were people I realized, oh, I could have imparted this bit of advice to him about traveling here or there, so even if it was, I knew a lot about Northern India. I can be a guide to Uttarakhand at this point. But so what I'm saying is, just any person I cross paths with, if there was just a bit of knowledge about even just the terrain that I could share, if there was a person I wanted to talk to and share a cup of tea with, I wasn't too afraid to ask, just go for it, do it, no matter what it is, no matter how small, and leave it be a complete experience. So you don't find yourself walking away like, oh, I wish I could have said that. I wanted to say that, but I didn't, or I wanted to offer, this person, a map or, whatever it is I have in my pack, but I didn't, I didn't want to live with that at all while I was over there. So I made sure, if there was anyone that I came across that I wanted to do this, or, I actually, I just remembered last night, I was like, oh man, I did that. I brought this Nepali chick. I saw some flowers, and there was a young Nepali woman, and I cut her some flowers and brought them to her. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird, but I wanted to, I did it. And we had some tea together. It was nothing very romantic or anything. I just lived in her village for the past winter. So, and I was leaving. So, but yeah, I just have the courage to be yourself, because you're telling yourself who you are all the time and what you want to do. But that's really where it push comes to shove, is going up and talking to that person, applying for that job, whatever the case may be. So
That's it, man. Well, I love it. It's it's funny. Like for me, from on this point, all I can say is like this is like listening to a buddy who's had an experience. And like if you've been to a Burning Man, and if you've traveled like I have, and you've heard some people's stories, like your story is nuts, but it is not the only nuts story I have heard. I have heard many. That's what. But I love how the lesson is always simple. It's like, look, okay, some shit happened,
yeah.
right? It's just like, but the end of the story is know who you are, live life to the fullest, and be authentically who you are 100%. Right? Like it's simple after that, right? And but we're drawn to these mystical things, and they're beautiful. But I feel like if we're doing it in an authentic way, we're going to be also given those spirit experiences from the positive forces. Right? It's like we want this quick fix all the time, right? And so if we can try and engage the path, keep it simple. Who am I? What am I looking for? Like when I was on this, I used to be really enjoy psychedelics and think that they were positive. And I still think that there can be some positive use for psychedelics and ayahuasca. And I've had some beneficial experiences on those. But when I notice how people use them, just like going snowboarding, like I'm not going to recommend you go off the jump that I go off. You're going to hurt yourself. There are reasons why some of these things, or surfing, whatever, right? I shouldn't be surfing a certain amount of wave. Every time I push myself surfing, I almost freaking kill myself with a wave because I want to be better than I am. So there's caution too, because you can be harmed. But the last time I was on one of these psychedelic conferences, I said, well, what are you seeking when you take that? You're seeking the creator. You're seeking the magic of life. You're seeking the best in you. You're seeking fullness. You're seeking whatever it is. Write down what are you seeking, and then pray to the creator. Start doing simple spiritual things like prayer, going into nature, actively using what you were given, right? Your soul, your spirit, to conquer this issue. From there, see if you can get anything done before you get this. Because so many people, oh yeah, I did this and everything was wonderful. And like, and I love that feeling. It's like, everything is so amazing. Well, can you bring up that feeling where you're sitting on a park bench and the trees and the grass and the birds? Can you bring up that appreciation? Can you train yourself to do that? Because in this digital world with the screens and the TVs and all this shit, we're being taken away from that. And so we need to choose of our own free will to train it within ourselves, to seek that, right? And you don't need to travel the world like you and I did and have these wild experiences, which is like, from this side, it's better that you did it. And I was like, holy smokes, like I can dodge a bullet there. But I've dodged some bullets myself. But I think, again, like that big takeaway is knowing who you are. And then, seeing, okay, while I was going through this, I still was able to monitor, myself. And this is what I'm bringing back from it, is this fullness and this authenticity, to knowing that there's a bigger realm that we're a part of, which also means if there are demons, then there are positive ones. And these demons are lesser than, in this medical, they have much less power. It's like that dolphin messing with a dolphin. We've got sonar and we've got all that stuff. And what they do is they try to cloud it. And the second we let go of that fear and we see clearly and we're connected to the true creator through our heart and our soul and all the good things, we're going to be guided, but it might be more simple, and simple can be very beautiful. And so that's my two. Do you want to add on to that? I did a spiel. You're welcome to a spiel too.
No, I think I gave my spiel, but I think that maybe the last thing would be just, like you were saying, I'm putting myself out there, so I might as well, if there are people that are looking to at least make sure that they're connecting with the right beings, or, dealing with any of that kind of externality, I'm willing to put myself out there and respond to an email or whatever the case may be, so.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll put the email in the show notes and in the YouTube, as long as YouTube is there. For those watching on YouTube, get your butt over to Odyssey and at mattbelair.com, because they're going to delete this crap. Well, they might not. People are telling me about speaking into existence. And although I agree with that, YouTube is an interesting thing. So go over to Odyssey where everything is backed up. But I appreciate everybody. Go to mattbelair.com because they deleted my Patreon also. And so that's where you can get all the videos backed up. But I'll link up Michael's stuff here. But man, I appreciate you coming on and being candid about this story. That must have been a very just super wild experience. And and challenging, but I love how always the lessons are simple. You know, they're
Yeah.
always simple. We have the answers within us. We have to learn how to guide ourselves. We have to learn how to be the masters of our own life. Like if you're in the middle of the ocean by yourself, or you're in the middle of the forest by yourself, it's you and the creator, you know, and source and your intuition. And as a random side note, if you want to learn how to develop these things, go for a run in the forest at night. And I used to do that, and I'll do it again, I'm sure sometime, but like it increases your sonar, and it is a meditation. If you don't think you can meditate, run through a scary ass forest at night by yourself. And you're gonna hear for 9 miles, and you will be very, very mother effing present, because you're like, oh my God, like, you know, you're just gonna imagine all kinds of crazy stuff. So yeah, so I appreciate you coming on and sharing what you did, and I invite people who are interested to send you an email. I think you have a couple blogs or something like that, right? Do you have a website or no?
No,
Oh, it was
no.
other blogs you sent me of writing about your story.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, we'll put your email up there, but thank you everybody for watching. We appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, Matt, thanks so much for having me on.
My pleasure. We'll stay in touch. Okay.